Seymour was really important in that he created an environment in which people were able to come and sort of tap into their own creativity and create institutions and programs and, films and photographs that were not only historical but were forward-looking and were able to, sort of enhance the Jewish culture of the Bay Area.
When I wanted to build an institution, I didn't know how to go about that. But I learned so much from Seymour. He encouraged me every step of the way. Seymour was really someone who was not only himself an institution builder, but who mentored other Jewish institution builders, usually young people who came to him filled with enthusiasm, with ideas, but needing from him guidance and support.
I had just finished college, and I had 6 months before I started graduate school. So I did what many people were doing at the time, and I was going to split for the coast. When I got there, I met up with a friend. We got an apartment in the Upper Fillmore, and I had to go looking for work. And I saw this listing for the Magnes Museum in Berkeley, which I had never even heard of it before. And I walk, and finally I come to this, magnificent old mansion, and I walk in, and I explained I was interested in a job, and everyone just sort of giggled, and I could see this didn't look that promising, but you had to wait till Seymour comes, and I didn't know who this was, of course. And all of a sudden this guy walks in, and he is funny and affable and unbelievably warm, and he takes me into his office, and he said, I could see he was a little skeptical about the whole proposition until it came out that I knew Yiddish. And he said, wait a minute, that changes everything. And he puts his arm around me, and he walks me outside, out through the door of the museum, out back to a carriage house out behind the museum. He opens up the door, and I see more Yiddish books than I had ever seen in my entire life. And he said, I'll hire you to help sort all this stuff out. It was, for me, the most exciting experience I'd ever had. And so he was kind of a model of someone who knew how to build something from scratch and do it out of sheer just kind of, spunkiness and determination and force of personality. He could get anyone to help out with this project, and he did, myself included.
I had this crazy idea about doing a Jewish film festival and was told that Seymour Fromer does really innovative work in the Jewish community and that he's a culture maven and supports young people in the Jewish community. And it was through Seymour's support that the first Jewish Film Festival took place. And he would just be very positive. I mean, this was Seymour's gestalt. He would always say things like, I see a great future for you. Or when I was really down, he would say to me, something will emerge. And then, of course, I heard later that he said this to everybody.
He'd put his hand up to eye level like this and say, something will emerge. He had a way of soothing, of calming those who were worried about their future.
I think many of us had been unaffiliated Jews or marginal to the established Jewish community, and Seymour was somebody who really wanted to draw people in to their identification with the Jewish community through a sense of culture and history.
Well, it was just extraordinary. The museum in the 1970s and 80s in particular, it was really a hothouse for Jewish creativity. And I recall walking in, I would see in the carriage house of the museum, David Moss working on his calligraphy. He would later move to Jerusalem and be one of the world's greatest Jewish calligraphers.
We had been married a year, and this crazy idea of mine to revive the art of the hand-done ketubah was just beginning to be recognized. An article on my work had been published in the National Jewish Monthly, and a traveling exhibit of my ketubot was being organized in Minneapolis. Seymour had a sixth sense for recognizing positive new cultural expressions, and he signed up to show the work at the Magnes. Dayenu, that would have been enough. But Seymour was an enabler. When the Minneapolis organizer fell through, he immediately jumped in and took the lead in arranging the whole traveling show. When he heard that Rosalind and I were basically throwing darts at the map to decide where to live, he offered me an artist in residency, but he also made sure Rosalind had a job at the Magnes to help make the move to Berkeley possible.
So we manufactured jobs. The Jewish encyclopedias were coming out. We thought Harold, he'd be a good salesman for the encyclopedias. Well, he was. He sold a lot. But then one of the Jewish agencies needed to sell cemetery plots. Well, in English or Yiddish, he sold them. He sold them because he told them they would never get real estate so cheap anywhere else at any other time.
I evolved from a hitchhiker from Hartford to Berkeley in the confusing early 70s, to joyously working with Seymour at the Magnes Museum, to running successful fundraising drives as campaign director of the East Bay Jewish Federation in the early 80s, to the present as owner of a successful investment business, all the while being the fortunate beneficiary of Seymour's superb guidance, rock-steady friendship, and unending optimism.
You're doing a great job. Keep it up. Keep it up. You're doing a great job.
I came out here in 1976. I was in some sense still a fugitive from the anti-war movement of the 60s and late 60s, although I was teaching at college at the time, but I had to move to Northern California where I knew no one. I figured, well, I'm Jewish, I'm not that observant, but at least it's an entry somewhere. And I stuck my resume at the Jewish Community Center at the time in San Francisco, which was all about film and video. And I got a call one day from Seymour saying what was this new thing, video, and he wanted to get into it for the museum, which was like him. He was always ahead of the game.
Well, you see, he's not really using film.
Oh, it's all.
We do this, see, if you put $1 in the pushka, then you get film.
We get proofs.
Then you get proofs. You see, this is what is known as instant camera TV.
Yeah, the exhibits at the Magnes were eclectic. I mean, there was literally very few boundaries of any kind. We were exploring, all the curators at the time were exploring in a very aggressive way the state of Judaism in America and around the world at this time, which was in great transition. We had exhibits that came from all over with absolutely every subject matter imaginable, and sometimes very controversial. There was an artist who was making something called the AIDS mezuzah, which was literally a glass mezuzah, vial, filled with AIDS, with HIV-tainted blood. And the exhibit became, to enter the museum, you had to cross through a portal with the mezuzah on the portal, walk right next to this, and people, you know, this was tremendously controversial. Some people wouldn't come in. We did that, it got a lot of publicity, it was very positive ultimately for the museum. But it was things like this that were occurring all the time. And it took courage on Seymour's part to approve exhibits like this. Marvelous, marvelous, interesting times at the museum.
Seymour, from a very early time, recognized the importance of saving Jewish history of the Bay Area. I mean, I don't think that there were other people out there who were prowling through bookstores, who were going to auctions, who were looking for sort of the everyday sort of tokens of Jewish existence in the Bay Area.
I remember many, many times meeting Seymour when he'd come into the museum carrying a paper bag. And I'd say, Seymour, what's in the bag? And he'd bring out these wonderful documents and scrapbooks, and we'd have to sit down and look at them immediately. And they were fantastic.
And it's just remarkable to think that, you know, from that one idea, from the time he saw this yearbook with the picture of the young Judah Magnes in it, until now, 50 years later, Seymour was the power behind collecting so many of the documents that now reside in the Bancroft Library.
He had so much energy to find the trail, and I don't think he was really ever interested in these objects that he pursued. I think for him, at least the way I was raised, every object had a story to tell. And he was after the story, so that the object was merely a way of entering into the tale of the relationship between one group of people and another group of people. He put an enormous amount of research into putting these things together, putting people together with these objects that he knew much more about, even restoring things and then sending them, oh, this museum in Vienna should have this, or, you know, this Italian community somewhere should have this, and handing people back their history. What was discussed at home was how much had been lost. I mean, the Holocaust was the overriding, unifying historical feature of our daily existence. I don't know if that's a sentence that makes sense, but the fact that there was so much loss, that I was just a gathering of the sparks. It was a gathering back that whatever there was had to be preserved, found, and at that time, in communities around the world, from Morocco to India, the communities were not able to properly take care of objects. This is a big deal, obviously, for museums all over the world.
Well, I think we're very conscious about preserving sort of the foundational legacy of the Magnes as being a collection-based institution, first of all, being an educational institution, being a kind of egalitarian institution, and being somewhat of a laboratory where we can continue to encourage new cultural and scholarly production that's based on a collection. So this kind of living, pulsing spirit of taking risk and experimenting, I think we want to make sure is preserved.
Well, I would say to Seymour right now that I miss you. Because I think that we have very few leaders like Seymour. He set the tone for respectful dialogue, for appreciation of community, for an interest in the variety and breadth of Jewish culture.
This to be able to one more time share his enthusiasm about a subject would mean a great deal to me.
I would just tell him I love him. Simple as that.
We're carrying on. We're continuing what you started.
You know, I miss him so much. And I'm used to being able to just call him and ask him anything. I have so many questions. I think about that every single day.
What would I say to him? The words wouldn't be necessary. They would be superfluous. It's like someone looking at this night sky and seeing the array of stars and being able to make out what those sequences were all about. And that was Seymour.
We were imaginative, we were daring, we were undefeatable.
I saw Seymour just a couple of days before he passed away. And as I was leaving, he said to me, and these were his last words to me, he said, "Bill, you never know what's going to walk through that door."